Welcome to WebRTC Live. In WebRTC Live, we cover the latest technical topics and business use cases for WebRTC and live video. As always, this episode is brought to you by WebRTC.Ventures, leading integrators of WebRTC video into your custom application.
All right, welcome back to WebRTC Live. Thanks for joining us. I'm Arin Sime, founder and CEO of WebRTC.Ventures and host of WebRTC Live. Here today with Chad Hart. Chad's joining us, well-known consultant in real-time communications in the WebRTC space, active thought leader and product manager working with a variety of companies in the space. Also the founder of WebRTCHacks, an excellent WebRTC technical blog at WebRTCHacks.com if you're not already familiar with it. Also co-founder of the Cranky Geek WebRTC event series, excellent conferences to attend or stream. Highly recommend those as well. So Chad, thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. Looking forward to this.
Excellent. Yeah, this is it's a dreary day here in Virginia today. I imagine the same in Boston. So our conversation is the highlight of my day today. So thanks.
All right. Well, it's we got 45 degrees here and cloudy, so it's kind of actually it's a relatively nice day for Boston.
That's pretty good for Boston.
Early February, yeah. So
excellent. So today's format, sometimes for those joining us for the first time, sometimes we have kind of a formal presentation from our guests. Other times it's more of a fireside chat, if you will. This is more the casual chat variety. And so a number of topics, though, that we can talk about, including some recent WebRTC hacks posts. And maybe, Chad, maybe we should start with one you posted this morning. I like the series title, Minimum Duration. That's kind of a similar format we tend to follow in WebRTC Live. Why don't you start by kind of telling us about that new format?
I will say, in general, WebRTC hack, almost everything I've written has been longer format. I tend to like the deeper dive analysis. My intent actually was originally to do, I have a list of like 8 topics I want to write about, or I think need coverage, that aren't super big, maybe, not worth 5,000 words by themselves, or worth maybe a few hundred. My original intent was like, oh, let me just do a big post and chain all them together and say, all right, here's all the stuff you should look out for, be aware of in 2020. Practical realities of trying to write that much, and it just never happens. Or like, it's also an SEO kind of search thing. Somebody's like wants to find an issue, like you're actually better off having an article that's just one topic rather than amalgamation. So I caved into my usual desire to kind of just go deeper and bigger, to just do something short, and we'll see how that works. So I'm still, certainly everything WebRTCHacks does is developer oriented. We're not like a marketing content SEO type, blog post. That's not why we're there. So hopefully we still have enough technical meat and a lot of references there. But the idea with this series, and I plan, again, I have another like 6 or 7 topics I'd like to cover, and likely others I'll come up with, to dive into certain topics that maybe the broader WebRTC community is not super aware of, or might have heard of and just doesn't have a lot of detail. Or just some place to just bring it to surface and attention, to give you some good references and links for, all right, what is this thing? And the first example today is perfect negotiation. And I do want to emphasize, maybe before we go into what that is and some of the other topics, is that we're not going to give up on doing the longer format and some of the deeper dive stuff. It's just you don't need I guess that's not always required to rehash everything, right?
Right.
But there are a lot of other scenarios. I mean, one of the things I'll talk about is like SVC, for example, WebRTC SVC, and we have some great posts that cover what SVC is and how that works. But if we want to do an update or something shorter, or what's the current state in terms of specifications and standards, that probably fits this new shorter format a little bit better. So we're gonna experiment with it, and I'm certainly curious to hear what readers out there, if they like it or not. So we'll find out in the viewership numbers eventually.
So that was a perfect segue to perfect negotiation then. So tell us a little bit more about what perfect negotiation is that you were blogging about this morning.
Yeah. So I mean, I will say, if you're deep in the WebRTC, and you probably have come across some of these glare type issues that can happen when you're setting up and establishing your own. You're controlling the RTC peer connection yourself, right? You have a lot of choices to make, and there's some reference codes on how to do that, but there are scenarios, because it's fundamentally asynchronous but still time dependent, where you can get in scenarios where one side is waiting for the other one, and the other one's waiting for, and they're out of sync, and therefore the connection is closed, right? So we call that glare. So Perfect Negotiation attempts to fix some of those issues. They're relatively small. They shouldn't be happening a lot, but they do happen. It's likely, I wasn't able to find anyone with any stats on how often I think that happens, but it's likely like single percentage or less of this happens, right? But these scenarios do happen, and they can be worse if you don't implement your RTC peer connection code correctly. So this was part of an effort initiated by Jan Navarro over Mozilla, but taken up really by all the browser vendors and broader community to go and address some of these issues. And they're addressing them via three means. I mean, one is actually, let's go back at the specs and write some proper reference code and tell people how to build it in the first place, so you don't get into these glare type situations when you develop this in the first place. So that's one part. The second part is actually there's a number of API improvements that can be made to the peer connection API and sub APIs to prevent this sort of thing from happening again, right? So there's a second group of category around that, and the third set is really around, all right, let's just like test this and interoperability between the browsers, which is a whole bit, and everyone seems to be on board with it. This is another great example of some of the nitty gritty details that go on behind the scenes that involve a lot of coordination, and actually are fairly technically complex, right? Because you're taking APIs that have been developed, and in some cases have been there for years, and dealing with interoperability and trying to fix some of these rarely occurring issues to basically get us closer to 100% connectivity when you initiate a peer connection. So this is all happening behind the scenes. Browsers are, they're actually they're all making improvements and making updates here. It's even interesting to see, like, I'm sure we'll get into one of my last posts too, was on Edgeium, the Edge browser, but even Microsoft is helping to improve the Chromium base here around some of these issues, right? So as a result, the broader WebRTC community benefits, right? We all do as developers.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So just to be clear then, so things like the restart ICE methods that Mozilla's working on, and Google, these are all part of the standard, and Perfect Negotiation is part of the WebRTC standard, or it's a combination of standard changes as well as kind of recommendations around it, and sort of how better to use it. Meaning this will be compatible in all the browsers, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, and that's the intent, is to clarify some of the specs and augment them or improve them as needed to make sure these types of scenarios don't happen.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Nice.
And yeah, there. It's already you can read the post, right? There's already links, and a lot of the stuff is already there. And in terms of the specs and the reference code for how to best do that, that's already been pretty well agreed upon and published, and you can see that in the links. Like the follow-on work is to do some of the API updates to implement those specs inside the browsers, and that's ongoing between Mozilla, Chrome. I assume Safari too. Actually didn't get a chance to reach out, get some confirmation on them, but I assume it's happening there also.
Yeah, and your post on WebRTCHacks links over to Jan Navarro's post. That coding depth.
With a lot of these short ones, like in most cases, there's a lot more detail. If there wasn't a lot more detail on it, then I would have probably done the longer post.
Sure.
Here. In this case, actually, there's a lot of good reference, and it's not a new topic. It's been around for a while. Just again, maybe not referenced that much, or you might have just seen a bullet point in it in somebody's roadmap around it. So we wanted to blow that out a little bit and explain it to people.
Yeah, definitely. So for those interested in more information, definitely do click on through to that post from Jan Navarro and talking about how to have polite peers to reduce glare. And there's a lot of interesting stuff in there as well. So you mentioned Edgeium. or the new term for Chromium in the Edge browser, and also a recent post that you did. Tell us a little bit more about that and what that means for browser compatibility. Are we at peak browser compatibility yet with WebRTC?
Well, peak would imply that it won't get any better.
That's true. I guess I'm not sure what the implications there, but are we compatible on everything? Is this everything we can be compatible?
I will say, I was hoping to find something that would be interesting in that, Edgeium post, and it largely wasn't. I still hope people see it. And there are some GUI differences and things like that. They're relatively minor. But the result of the tests were it's to say, the WebRTC stack, it seems, inside Edge is the same as it is in Chrome. And somewhat by design, but I was curious to see did something end up a little bit different for one reason or another. But it's basically the same. And Microsoft said before, and they've made statements after, that almost like everything they're doing is going to get distributed back to the Chrome, Chromium base anyway. So they should stay the same.
Right.
So that's
so the more boring, the better in this case, right?
Yeah. So then the question is, well, if you were supporting the Edge base, your life probably got easier, assuming you probably gave up on a lot of the ORTC type APIs and things there, and they weren't really using. Maybe there wasn't a whole lot of traction there, which is another reason to switch, but or for Microsoft to switch to the Chromium base. But so your life probably got a lot easier. So now you're essentially just developing for one browser instead of two very different browsers, right? So that makes life a lot easier.
Yeah, definitely. I think kind of over the history of WebRTC, when we talk about optimization, there's at least in my experience, there's been kind of two phases of that conversation. First, compatibility, not optimization, but is everything compatible in terms of the video chat aspects of WebRTC between the browsers? And then the second sort of add-on conversation is, what about screen sharing? Is that compatible? And that's always had a different, level of compatibility across the browsers. What's the current take on screen sharing across the browsers, to your knowledge? And in particular, you referenced I think in post about Edge possibly doing some optimization around screen sharing. So are there still differences we can expect?
Yeah, also, I think, well, a lot of the screen sharing challenge initially, right? Before Get Display Media, which is the kind of the new screen sharing API, it was kind of a bear to support multiple browsers because you had to do extension mechanisms and like with Chrome and so Get Display Media. I haven't seen or heard too many issues with people using that cross browser today. That seems to be pretty good. I will say where I do see people have problems is like particularly recently with OS X Catalina, is some of the new browser or some of the new operating system based security permissions, right? So they all of a sudden basically enforce a new security policy for screen. They call it screen recording. So if you go share your screen, you need to actually give Chrome explicit permission to allow screen sharing, which is an extra step, not that big a deal. But where it's really painful is you're in the middle of a meeting and said, you gotta do this. Okay, I'm gonna give permission, and hopefully the GUI and your WebRTC app gives you a guide to tell you what to do if it doesn't pop up automatically. You go set up, and then it tells you, screen, settings won't take effect until you restart. So then you're in the and the worst part is you're in the middle of trying to give a big presentation or a webinar like this, and you're trying to share your screen. I gotta go restart my browser. So that part can be pretty painful. And that's just an example of one environment where there's really was no pre-warning on that. You kind of just have to get over it because it's not unique to one vendor, one application. It's actually the same applies even outside of WebRTC. So I guess the issues I've seen are more along those lines. I guess your last comment was on I guess Microsoft and screen sharing improvements.
Mhm.
They actually, in one of the comments on that post, mentioned that any improvements they make are going to be contributed back to the main Chromium base. So it doesn't seem that it'll be Edge specific. It'll apply to WebRTC throughout. And you can certainly imagine, you see it a lot, like when you're trying to share a spreadsheet, you actually want to have very crisp lines, right? So it'd be nice to have some optimizations to make it look really nice, and trying to find the right balance between screen quality, bandwidth, and refresh rate, right? Or frame rate is always a challenge. But having another party, particularly one that deals with lots of documents, and has been doing document sharing via other applications like Skype and Teams, and I think they'll help WebRTC quite a bit for people who care about doing that, which I do. I share spreadsheets and documents all the time like that, right? So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's a great area for them to contribute for sure. Yeah, so there's been a couple of since the last time we chatted, at least publicly, a couple of conferences that you've had panels on, and to give you a chance to tell us any sort of high-level summary or conclusions you drew from. Let's start with the last Cranky Geek, actually, where you had a panel of all the browser vendors, which I think was the first time you had all on stage together at once. Is that right?
Yes, it is. And I previously at a ClueCon event had representatives from all the different browser vendors, but not necessarily the actual product leads. So this time we actually had the people in charge of the browser all there talking at the same time. And that was great. I was very excited to have them all together. It's a good sign for your community that actually you can get all these people together and they all work together. So it's not like, we did really want to emphasize that it's a very communal thing. And certainly you as you see in the panel, there's different perspectives on focus and energy and what matters and what doesn't, right?
Sure.
But in general, they work together, right? To work together. So I guess out of Cranky Geek this year, that was certainly one of the bigger highlights. I guess one of the sessions I enjoyed the most, and thought was good interaction. But there was a lot of them that were pretty good. It was actually I think our best event we've had so far. In our attendance and everything else was records too. So hopefully we're still going in the right direction there. And I do want to say we are actually scheduled to do, I think it's November 19th this year. We'll probably, once we have a venue and everything finalized, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll start to announce that so people can kind of plan ahead a little bit more than we've done in the past for Cranky Geek. But so that'll be coming up again.
Excellent.
Too.
Looking at San Francisco for that?
Yeah.
Staying there? Yeah.
Nice. We're trying for the same building facility. There were some challenges. We're trying to work through that. So anyway, that hopefully we'll have an announcement at a minimum with the date pretty soon, like within a week. So people would. And if you want to tentatively put it in your calendar, I think it's the 19th. It was like the third Friday in November. Go ahead and pencil it in now.
Will do, definitely.
Yeah, I guess and back to your previous comment. In terms of event takeaways, highlights. Last year we gave a lot of focus to AI and RTC and tried to do almost 70% of the content or topic was around doing machine learning or speech analytics or computer vision type topics. That's still a really big theme in this event, and you'll see that come through. But we mixed in a lot of also just core kind of implementing WebRTC and what does that mean. And a good example is like we had like Phantom Auto, which is a driverless car type company they actually help driverless car companies do the training and all that, and they walk through their example, right? So here's a company that is really at the core of it is a machine learning AI based, but their talk was really around how they optimize H.264 to work inside that application, right? Because they're dealing with such high volume of data and they need to have good compression without losing critical pieces. So It's kind of a good example of how it's still kind of an AI topic, but it's more around RTC mechanics and how do you optimize for bandwidth and video codecs, that sort of thing. So there's a kind of a mix of those types of themes in there. We did also come back to doing demos, and we took had Tim Penton back, went through. He actually used Google has this cool little called Coral AI, which is puts their TensorFlow processor unit TPU on a small little Raspberry Pi size type device. So he actually showed how you can take that and train a robot to move around the room and view that. You can basically use a WebRTC stream to see what's going on there. In that case, really the WebRTC part was the easy part, especially for someone like Tim who's done it a bunch. But I love there's certainly a lot of the stuff I've done with WebRTCHacks and some of my hobbies and things I like to do are robots and how do you put video feeds and send that kind of camera interaction there. So I particularly enjoyed that one.
Nice. Yeah. Tim always does a cool job with stuff like that. So excellent. Well, we're at the time that we usually set for these interviews, but I feel like we could keep talking for a long time. But always good to catch up with you, Chad. Are there any other kind of highlights of either where you see WebRTC at now or things you're looking forward to this year or any sort of plugs that you want to make before we wrap up?
I don't have anything specific other than, hopefully if you care about WebRTC, you're already subscribed or you know about WebRTCHacks. If not, please go check it out. Yeah. People tell me they like it, which I keep doing it. And lots of credit to Fippo, Philip Honka too, who's my companion and helper and co-author over there. We actually have a pretty we're going to do a lot more writing this year. That's kind of our New Year's resolution. So there'll be a lot more coming out from WebRTCHacks this year. Awesome.
Well, definitely looking forward to it from you and Fippo. Always appreciate the content there. Long or short, it's all good. We appreciate it. So yeah, check out for those watching. Make sure you can go read the content and also get in touch with Chad through WebRTCHacks.com and look for those announcements about Cranky Geek coming up soon too. And you can learn more about us at WebRTC.ventures for application development and also to sign up for our newsletter to find out about future episodes of this. If you have a topic or would like to be a guest, you're welcome to reach out to us as well. And Chad, thanks again for your time. Appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of winter in Boston. Hope it goes well.
Yeah, I haven't had to do too much shoveling yet, but it'll happen.
Yeah, it'll happen. All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining. Let's make it live.
Thanks for joining us for WebRTC Live. Visit our website at WebRTC.ventures to learn more about our custom design and development services and to learn more about upcoming episodes of WebRTC Live.